If you are one of our Sunday home churchers, then I want to be the first to say Happy Mother's Day to all of the mothers and the individuals in our life who act as those mother-like figures. You mean so much to us, and I wanted to show some way to show my appreciation for what you do. So knowing as much as I do about the fairer sex, I brought up for you a reading of Nicholas Sparks' The Notebook.
Who am I? And how, I wonder, will this story end?
All right, guys, so listen up. I know some of you guys might have woken up this morning and you might be wondering, why is my wife a little bit upset? It's because you might have forgotten that it's Mother's Day. Now, if that's the case, don't freak out. I got you covered. Come over to the hub after the service. I have 24 different roses that are sitting here. I know we're not going to use all of them for the hub church. Come over there, grab a rose, just tell them that I had asked Pastor Joseph to do it the whole time and he forgot to get it to me, blame it on me. It's fine. And then come over, get one, give it to their wife, boom, you're out of the doghouse. So anyway, just pay it forward. Okay, enough of that. Let's go ahead and get into today's lesson. There's a coffee mug I remember seeing one time that I really liked. It had a picture on it, an illustration really of the slaying of Goliath. So you had David and he was letting the stone loose, and then you had Goliath who was reeling back, about to fall dead on the ground. And in this case, it picked on how a lot of people will interpret this story. It had a big label over the character of Goliath saying, "Your life's obstacles," and then over the character of David, it had a label that said, "Not you." You see, what this was doing was picking on the fact that a lot of people will talk about having these Goliaths in our life and needing to overcome these different obstacles that we have, and you can do it. It's that whole thing that people will quote in Philippians 4:13, where they will say, "I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength." And in doing that, a lot of times the scriptures can take on this very self-help type of flavor. It can almost look like more of a motivational speech than it does something that is about an all-powerful creator. And in doing this, what actually happens is people end up missing out on what the Bible is all about. You see, the Bible isn't about the fact that God is going to somehow make you into this superhuman and that then you are going to be able to do all this stuff. It's about quite the opposite. It's about the fact that the world is going to throw all kinds of things at you, and guess what? You can't help yourself. But God can overcome. And so when you sit here and you turn your life over to Christ and you become a new creation, then you are uniting with that person who overcomes. Now, no part of that sentence is that Christ all of a sudden turned around and gave you a really good set of pre-workout, and then now you're going to be able to, lift a whole bunch of weight. You're going to be able to carry whatever burdens that you have in your life. No, instead what it's saying is it's saying that you unite with Christ, and I can't, but Christ can. This is actually something that you end up reading in John when, Christ is talking about overcoming the world, where he says, you will experience all kinds of sufferings, but I have conquered the world. Now notice in there, Christ doesn't say you're going to experience all kinds of pain and suffering, but don't worry because you're going to get stronger. We're going to help you get through this and be better. No, instead he says, but I have conquered the world. And so you see what is being portrayed here is something that's very different than what you see in a lot of modern theological groups. Something that, I hate to put it this way, but you do see in a lot of very contemporary megachurches. Individuals who want to portray this style of Christianity that is all about how powerful you can become, or how you can self-actualize the different things that you feel like you're lacking in your life. And what's happening in this way of perceiving Jesus is you're basically turning Jesus into your personal trainer instead of what he really is, your Savior. The Bible is all about what we see John the Baptist say when he says that in order for Christ to increase, I must decrease. He must be the thing that takes prominence in my life, and I have to be willing to humble myself. Sit here and read exactly that part that we're talking about in the book of John, and then read what the author of the Gospel of John has to say in his first letter, 1 John. What you're going to see in here is reinforcement of that idea that it is in fact Christ who conquers all, and then we are enjoined and are built into that body of Christ. It is not us who overcomes with Christ as much as it is we die to ourselves. We are now reborn in the way Christ has made us, and because of that, we are a part of Christ's overcoming. There are a lot of different places in the Bible you can go to talk about God using individuals who are willing to humble themselves. And you can also find a lot of stories about the exact opposite. Individuals who started flattering themselves that they were able to overcome, that they were able to do it all. And you can see exactly how things worked out for those individuals. One of those examples that I like going to is the person of Gideon, and that is because in the life of Gideon, you can actually see both sides of that coin. He started out as an individual who was essentially crying out to God. How could you allow me and my people to be in a place where we are under bondage? You see, Gideon was living in a time of Judges. That's where his study is in the book of Judges. And in this time of Judges, what you had was God's people who did not have a king. They instead had these judges that were individuals who helped them apply God's law to their lives. Because the idea was you don't need a king because I, God, am your king, so you don't need a king. But I'll give you judges to help you interpret my law and apply it to your lives. And so in a period where these foreign individuals were oppressing God's people in the promised land, God raised up Gideon. And what you can see initially, and what you'll read in your small groups here in a second, is that Gideon actually even acknowledges his insufficiency, but yet God says, no, you're going to go do this great thing. So what ends up happening in the life of Gideon? Well, he ends up being a part of great victories. There's the kind of the famous story of him and the army that is raised, and that even though his army was already at a severe disadvantage, God said, you have too many people. So God actually had him send people away from his army. And why? Because God explicitly said, I don't want you to be able to say that you did this by your own power. I want you to know that it is the Lord your God who has delivered you. So it was very important to God that the people knew that it wasn't through their own power. It was through the delivering power of God that they were able to overcome. Not because of who they were, but because of who God is. And so you end up seeing them overcome, and as they do this, Gideon ends up getting a little full of himself. All of a sudden, he starts acting a lot less like a judge who is interpreting God's law, and instead, he starts looking more and more like a king. But remember, the whole point of this period of the Judges is that God's people do not need a king. God is their king. And so Gideon puts on this look. And one of the other things that you'll read here in a second is seeing how he starts looking, and others even start seeing him like a king. And as a result of that, he ends up stumbling. There ends up being idol worship, and it is something that he and his family end up having to wrestle with, eventually ending in tragedy. This is something that unfortunately you can see in the lives of many individuals who maybe even start off well enough. Many individuals who may even be well-known pastors or writers or songwriters or anything like that, who start out with the best of intentions. I want to love God, I want to serve God, but then they get a little bit full of themselves. It's a warning to anybody who flatters themselves that they are a spiritual leader, lest they start thinking that I am some divine instrument that God is using to run this Bible study, to do something in this church, to do this ministry. God doesn't need you. And it's important to understand that, because it's only when we are willing to minimize ourselves that we can fully see the beauty of what God is doing, what God is accomplishing. Through our humility, we are able to fully experience the magnitude of God's power in our own struggles. That way, when we see that obstacle, that thing that we don't think we can overcome, and it's able to be overcome regardless, we're able to see that that wasn't because I did anything. It's because I serve an amazing God, and our God can overcome anything in this world. And I think one of the reasons why this is so important is because sometimes if we start thinking that we're the ones who are overcoming, then we start expecting that the way in which we're going to overcome our obstacles is going to be the way that we want to overcome it. But sometimes the way that we overcome our obstacles is the way that God has intended it for some kind of greater good. one of the trends that you see across the entire Bible is God using over and over and over again different individuals who did not see themselves as being equal to God. Actually, individuals who had these critical flaws, and in many instances they knew and they were very aware of their flaws. I mean, you look at the person of Abraham, and Abraham himself, I mean, he got impatient, with the covenant that God had promised him, and turned around and said, I better go have kids my own way because I don't know if God's going to do things in my time. You end up looking at Moses, had a stutter. Over and over again would bring up the fact that he's not qualified and he's not capable of being able to speak. And look at what God did through Moses. You look at the person of Rahab. Rahab was a prostitute. I mean, if we saw somebody like that today, I mean, it would be hard for many good church-going people to look at somebody like that and turn around and say like, oh yeah, that person's going to be a bold instrument for God's good. You end up looking at David, a critically flawed individual, succumbed to his temptation to lust and was a murderer. And despite all of these things, is an individual that is known as an individual after God's own heart. Even looking at the individuals that Christ called directly, and you see people like Matthew, who were cheats, were tax collectors, individuals that were viewed as traitors to their own countrymen. And yet, what does Christ have to say as soon as Matthew is called up? He doesn't turn around and try to make excuses for anything they did, but instead he points out this simple fact, that a doctor does not come to heal the healthy, but to heal the sick. He says, you should learn what this means, that I desire mercy and not sacrifice. For I did not come to save the righteous, but the sinners. These words are something that should be humbling to all of us, but it also should be very, very comforting. That there is no background, that there is no sin, that there is no burden that you carry that can keep you outside of the redemptive love of Jesus Christ. There is nothing that you could have possibly have done or have conceived or anything that you will do that will put you outside of the power of God's grace. But you have to remember that grace is not there because of anything you did. It's not because you said something magical. It's not because you earned it. It's not because you did this or that, or you paid the right atonement or penance for whatever you did in the past. It's despite yourself that Christ did what he did. Christ died on a cross because that's what he saw as good. And that's what he saw as fulfilling the purpose of his creation, was to die on that cross so that you could be saved. And when you start looking at your life through that lens, through a lens that says that I was worth it enough for Christ to die on that cross, then you can maybe start seeing where the true power of the gospel is. It's not in the fact that you are going to become a superhero or that you are going to become some kind of mega magical individual that can do anything you put your mind to, but it's because there is no force on earth, not even death, that Christ has not overcome. And so when we take ourselves and put ourselves on the side burner and are willing to say, I am willing to become a new creation, that I desire to become that creation that God has intended. I now surrender myself to you, Christ, and I now want you to make me a part of your body. Then we are now enjoined with He who has overcome every single obstacle that we could ever imagine, every single obstacle that life will ever throw at us, and even obstacles that we may not even see ahead of us yet. Christ has overcome everything. So what are you leaning on to overcome the obstacles in your life? That's our lesson that we have for you today. I hope you're able to get something out of it. Until we can meet again, God bless, and happy Mother's Day.